more loving, more mature. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of hurting her, yes, but also afraid of losing her. Because every time she threatened to leave, something inside me twisted and caved. She was brilliant, and broken, and magnetic, in a way I couldn't explain. She made millions telling the world I destroyed her, while I was in a coma, hooked to machines that kept me breathing. The irony burned deeper than my shattered ribs ever could. I wasn't even conscious when she became famous for surviving me. While surgeons worked to rebuild my insides, Gisela was on podcasts, in book clubs, on TV, recounting how loving me had nearly killed her, how walking away from me was the bravest thing she'd ever done, except she never walked. I left. I remember that night vividly, every broken piece of it. The last thing I said to her before I blacked out behind the wheel was, "Gisela, this isn't working. I'm done pretending we're happy." I was driving alone, headed to nowhere, needing air, space, freedom. Then came the screech, the crash, and the blackness, and while I hovered between life and death, she was signing a deal for her next chapter. The first time I saw her face again was on a billboard, bright lights, towering over traffic. That same smile she used to give me when she was proud of a line she'd written, but now it was polished, branded. It wasn't a smile for me anymore. It was a smile for the world that believed her. People don't question pain wrapped in beautiful sentences. And Gisela? She knew how to bleed on paper in ways that made her look like an angel who survived a devil. But I wasn't the villain she needed me to be. I was the man who once gave her everything, and she was the woman who sold it. They say if you stay silent long enough, the world writes your version for you. Maybe it's time I spoke, not for revenge, not to ruin her, but because truth, when buried long enough, starts to rot, and I'm done carrying the stink of lies she planted on my name. My name is Bob Mercer. I used to think I was a good man, not perfect, far from it. I had my sharp edges, my quiet seasons, my long silences. But I never raised my hand. I never called her names. I never cheated. What I did was love Gisela Hart with every damn ounce of myself. That was my crime. That's what she turned into a cautionary tale. Loving her too much. Loving her past the point it made sense. We met the way real stories begin, quietly. At a reading in a back alley bookstore where the ceiling fan groaned louder than the author. She sat 2 seats away, scrawling in a beat-up moleskin like her life depended on it. Long dark hair, restless legs, a chipped ring on her middle finger she'd twist when lost in thought. When the lights came on and the author thanked everyone for coming, she didn't clap. She just closed her notebook and looked at me. "You didn't like it either, huh?" she said. That was Gisela. Sharp, honest. The kind of girl who made you feel seen and skinned in the same breath. We talked for hours outside that night, until the bookstore locked its gates and the street went dark. I walked her home. She let me. The next day, I sent her coffee without a return address. 2 days later, she left a note on my windshield. "I hate soy milk. Try again." We orbited each other for months before colliding. Gisela had fire in her veins and poetry in her bones. She wrote about pain like she'd been married to it, and maybe she had. Her parents divorced young. Her father remarried 5 times. Her mother blamed her for everything that went wrong in life, including the lines on her face. Gisela used to tell me she never knew what stable love looked like, and maybe that's why she couldn't recognize it when I offered it. I was a startup consultant when we met. Small firm, long hours, good pay. I liked routine. I liked rules. I liked the idea that love could be a choice, not just a feeling. I wanted forever. Gisela wanted freedom. At first, those things didn't feel so far apart. We moved in together, 6 months after we met. She lined our bedroom with books and spilled ink on everything. I cooked. She edited. I ironed. She dreamed. She'd crawl into my lap at 3 a.m. and whisper ideas in half-sleep, expecting me to remember them. I always did. In public, people envied us. 2 artists, one with words, one with plans. In private, we were more complicated. Her emotions didn't come in waves, they came in storms. She could laugh like a girl one moment, then slam doors like a hurricane the next. I learned how to soothe her, how to step back when her mood swung wild. But sometimes, I lost my footing. I remember once I told her she was acting unfair, that she was blaming me for things I never did. She got quiet, dead quiet. Then looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't ever call me crazy. That's what weak men do when they can't handle strong women." I hadn't called her crazy. I never would. But that didn't matter. The accusation stuck in the air like smoke. Eventually, I stopped fighting back. I let her have the last word. I started writing my thoughts down in a journal instead of saying them out loud. I convinced myself it was better that way. Gether for 3 years. In those years, she wrote 2 novels, neither published. She always said she was waiting for the real story. Something honest. Something raw. I didn't know that story would be me. We never married. She said marriage was just paper. I said commitment was more than paper. So we stayed in that gray space for a long time. Committed but not official. Tethered but not bound. The last 6 months were the worst. She started accusing me of things. Small things at first. Why didn't you text back faster? Why did you like that girl's post? Why are you so cold all the time? I tried explaining. She wasn't listening. Everything I did was proof of some sin she'd already decided I'd committed. I was tired, exhausted, but I still stayed. Then came the night I walked out. I hadn't planned it. We argued over something dumb, a cup left in the sink, an event I said I'd go to and didn't. She said I didn't love her anymore. I said maybe that's true. That was it. She didn't cry, she didn't beg. She just looked at me like I was a stranger. I left, got in my car, drove nowhere, and wrecked. Woke up 6 days later to the sound of my name on a news segment. They were reviewing her book. Her voice filled the room, soft and steady, recorded from an interview the day before. "He taught me a lot," she said. "Mostly about pain. But pain makes the best stories." The host called it a heartbreak anthem for modern women. I closed my eyes, and for the first time I wished I hadn't survived. The real betrayal wasn't the book. It was the lie behind it. The story Gisela built out of our wreckage, cleaned up and dramatized, sold as gospel truth to strangers who'd never met me. But the moment it really started to sink in wasn't in the hospital. It was 2 weeks later, when I finally stood on my own feet, left the clinic, and stepped into the world that had already judged me guilty. I walked into a bookstore just to see it with my own eyes. There it was. Front shelf, bestseller table, cover polished to perfection. The Man Who Shattered Me. I picked it up. Beneath the title was a subtitle I hadn't noticed before. Surviving Emotional Abuse in Plain Sight. I didn't know how. Long I stood there staring until a voice behind me said, "That book'll gut you." A stranger, late 20s, holding a latte and a copy of Gisela's book like it was scripture. She's brilliant, isn't she? Raw, honest. I cried like 3 times. Men like that should be locked up. I turned my face slightly, didn't say a word, just nodded and walked away. Because how do you explain to someone that the monster they're crying over doesn't exist? Later that night, I checked her page. Hundreds of thousands of followers, post after post, book quotes laid over moody black and white portraits, snippets from interviews, fan art, women telling her she saved their lives, that she gave them the courage to leave their own bobs. She never used my full name in the book. She didn't have to. Enough details were there. Places we lived, stories only we shared, moments she used to cry over, now reworded like I was some cold manipulator with a perfectly rehearsed villain arc, and people bought it. Even Lisa messaged me. Lisa, my old colleague, my best friend before things got complicated. I don't know what to say. I read the book. Is any of it true? I didn't reply. Because even a no felt like I was defending myself against something too carefully crafted to undo. That's the thing about betrayal. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's published quietly, passed around at brunch, and praised for being brave. Gisela didn't stab me in the back. She dissected me, labeled my bones, and put them on display for sympathy clicks. I couldn't even call her. We hadn't spoken since I left that night. I didn't know where she lived now. A mutual friend told me she'd moved across the city, gotten a publicist, started dating again. David, apparently. A journalist who interviewed her, and then never left fitting. The final twist came when my company dropped me from the contract I was negotiating. They didn't say it was because of the book, but their tone changed. Their smiles faded. The CFO had that unreadable look in his eyes when he shook my hand goodbye. I knew that look. It said, "You're a liability now. I lost income. I lost opportunities. I lost my silence." That's when I reached out to Gisela. A short message, straightforward. "We need to talk." No reply. A week later, I sent a second message. "I'm not here to fight. But this book, it's not all true. You know that. Please." Again, nothing. 3 nights after that, I saw her, at a panel event for debut authors, speaking about narrative truth. I didn't go inside. I couldn't stomach it. But I watched from across the parking lot as she stepped out of the venue, bathed in flash photography, holding David's hand. And she looked happy. So damn happy, as if I hadn't existed, as if the pages she'd written had buried me completely, and she could finally stand on my grave without guilt. I felt something fracture then, not rage, not heartbreak, just a clean snap inside my chest. I could forgive pain. But this wasn't pain. This was erasure. So I did what I never thought I would. I opened my own laptop, and I started writing. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I cared what the world believed, but because I needed to remember. I needed to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined it all, that the love I gave her was real, that I wasn't the monster she carved out of me and handed to the masses. Because I was tired of bleeding in silence. And if she could sell her version of us, then so could I. There were nights when I couldn't breathe, not from the pain in my ribs or the scars beneath my skin, but from everything I couldn't say. I'd lie awake at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice in my head, not the voice from the book, but the voice from our old kitchen. The one that used to hum off-key while brewing coffee, the one that laughed in the middle of a sentence just because she remembered something mid-thought, the one that whispered, "I love you," even when I hate everything else. Now, that voice belonged to someone else. A version of her I didn't know, a woman who stood on stages and cried for applause, a woman who handed pieces of our life to strangers with perfectly timed pauses and well-practiced trembles in her throat. I used to be the only one who saw her fall apart. Now she fell apart for cameras. Some days I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, that I didn't care. I told myself I was over her, over all of it. And yet, I found myself memorizing the sentences in her book like I was searching for clues. Like somewhere buried between the lines there might be a sign that she regretted, that she missed me, that she didn't believe her own words, but I never found it. What I did find were pieces of me that didn't belong to her anymore, shoved into metaphors, stripped of context, burned for plot. I saw myself in the villain she created, and I hated how easily people believed it. I hated how easily I almost believed it. There were moments when I'd wonder, did I really make her feel that small, that trapped? But then I'd remember, no, that's not how it happened. That's not who I was. I kept telling myself that, over and over. Because if I stopped for even a second, the doubt would creep in and eat me alive. One night, I went to our old apartment. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself it was still real, that it happened, that there was once a time when we weren't enemies on the page. The building hadn't changed, same creaky stairs, same chipped mailbox. I stood outside our door for a long time, hand hovering over the knob, not daring to knock, and then I left. Because whatever was behind that door now, it wasn't ours anymore. and I didn't want to see someone else living in the space where we used to dream. Back at my place, I tried writing again. I'd type a paragraph and delete it. I didn't know where to begin. If I told the truth, people would say I was retaliating. If I stayed silent, people would keep believing her. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes from being misremembered. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped answering calls. Even Lisa eventually gave up. She'd tried to check on me again, asking if I wanted to grab coffee, to talk, to clear the air. I left the message unread. I couldn't face anyone who'd read that book and still looked at me like I was the same. And the silence stretched longer. Days melted into each other. Grief doesn't always come in tears. It comes in stillness, in staring at the wall for hours, in not recognizing your own reflection, in losing track of what day it is. But the worst part, I missed her. Not the author, not the woman on interviews. I missed the version of Gisela that used to curl into my chest and talk about nothing for hours. The girl who hated olives, who once cried over a short story that reminded her of her childhood. The one who made me feel like home was a person. I hated myself for still missing her. But I did. God, I did. And that made everything worse. Because I couldn't even talk about it. How do you admit you're still in love with the person who turned you into a villain? One night, while scrolling through old photos, I found a video. It was short, just 20 seconds. Gisela laughing in our old kitchen, wearing my hoodie, dancing barefoot. She'd set the phone up without me knowing, just to capture us being normal, she once said. At the end of the video, she turned to the camera and whispered, "If I ever write a book, I hope it's this version of us that people see." I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I closed the laptop, and I cried. Quiet, gut-deep sobs. The kind that no one hears, the kind that don't need witnesses. I'd already lost her. But that night, I realized something worse. I'd lost the memory of us too. Because now, no matter how much I tried to remember the truth, her version had become louder than mine. The twist didn't come like some big reveal. It didn't explode or scream. It arrived quietly in a manila envelope left outside my door. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in months. Her handwriting. I stood there staring at it, afraid to open it, because a part of me thought, maybe this is her apology. Maybe she's finally telling the truth. Maybe the woman I loved is still buried somewhere inside the one who sold me to the public like a fable. I sat on the floor, legs folded, the city lights bleeding through my window. I opened the envelope with fingers that didn't feel like mine. Inside was a single typed letter, unsigned but unmistakably hers. "Bob, I didn't write the ending. The publisher did. The last 2 chapters, they weren't mine. I fought it. I really did, but they said it needed a resolution. Something that made me look strong. Something that made you look like the reason I became better. I know that doesn't make it okay, but I wanted you to know. That wasn't me." I read the letter 3 times, and each time it felt like someone was pressing down on my chest. Because now I didn't know which part was real. Was it the raw truth she put into the first pages, or the character assassination in the last? She never once denied the story she told about me, but she was now saying some of it wasn't hers. That parts of it had been twisted, polished, turned into marketable pain. It was like being stabbed, twice, first by her hand, then by someone else's, using her name. What the hell was I supposed to do with that? I wanted to scream, not because I was angry, but because it meant something even worse. Maybe she didn't set out to destroy me. Maybe she just let it happen. That kind of betrayal is colder than rage. It's permission in disguise. It's letting someone else ruin the man you once said you loved, just so your book could sell better. And you sleep at night because you didn't hold the knife. You just handed it over. The next morning, I showed the letter to Lisa, the only person I trusted anymore. She read it in silence, then looked at me. "Do you still love her?" I didn't answer because I didn't know, not anymore. Then she asked something else. "Are you going to tell anyone?" I hesitated again. Because if I exposed the truth, people would turn on Gisela. Maybe her publisher would drop her audience would crumble. The girl who told the world she'd been hurt would become the liar who hurt someone else. And for a brief second, I wanted that. I wanted her to know what it felt like to be doubted, to have your pain questioned, your name dragged through something you never intended. But then I remembered her face in that video, laughing, barefoot, safe. And it broke something in me all over again, because maybe she deserved the consequences. But I didn't want to be the one who delivered them. That night, I put the letter back in the envelope and shoved it into the back of a drawer. Let the world think what it wants. Let them love her for the mask. Let them hate me for the story. I'd live with it, but I wouldn't let it destroy me anymore. The confrontation didn't happen where I expected. It wasn't a courtroom. It wasn't backstage at some book signing. It was in a grocery store. I was standing in the frozen aisle, staring at a row of microwave dinners like they held the meaning of life, when I heard a voice behind me. I knew that voice, soft but precise. Like every word was weighed before it left her lips. Bob? I turned slowly, and there she was, Gisela, in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes, holding a basket with nothing but 2 apples and a box of tea. She looked human. For the first time in a long time, she didn't look like the version of herself she performed for the world. No lights, no camera, no curated grief, just her. We stood there, neither of us speaking. The hum of the freezer filled the space between us. You look tired, she said eventually. I let out a breath. That's funny. You look like you just stepped out of a sadness commercial. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, almost. Still sharp. I wanted to be cruel. I wanted to ask her if she enjoyed watching me bleed in silence while her followers called her a hero. I wanted to hold up her book and ask her which parts were lies and which parts she believed just enough to make them feel true. But all I said was, "Why now?" She blinked. "I didn't know you still lived around here." I meant the book. She lowered her eyes. Because it was the only thing anyone wanted from me. That's a hell of a reason to dismantle someone's life. You think I don't know that? Her voice cracked. You think I don't replay every sentence I let them keep, wondering if that was the one that finally made you hate me? I don't hate you, I said. I envy you. She looked up, confused. You got to shape the story. You got to turn heartbreak into a narrative that made people cry in the right places and cheer for your healing. Me? I just got the silence. The whispers. The looks like I was some monster too polite to roar. She bit her lip. I didn't want it to be like that. But it is like that, Gisela. That's the part you can't rewrite. She stepped closer. Her hand hovered for a second, like she wanted to reach for mine. I sent the letter because I needed you to know the ending wasn't mine. I read it. It didn't help. Then, what would help? Her voice was quiet, raw. Do you want me to go online and post an apology? Tell everyone I made some of it up? Would it even matter? I asked. You already handed them the version of me they wanted. They'll think I forced you to retract it, that I'm pressuring you, that I'm doing it again. We stood in silence again. She looked at the apples in her basket like they were suddenly too heavy to hold. I lost friends, I said finally. Work. Opportunities. I walk into rooms and wonder who's read it. Who believes it? Who's waiting to catch me slip so they can say, see, that's the guy from the book. She looked up again. There were tears in her eyes, but they didn't fall. She'd always been good at holding them back until it hurt more. I wanted to be seen, she whispered. Not as the girl you left, but as someone worth remembering. You were worth remembering, I said. Until you erased me to make yourself unforgettable. She flinched. I hated how much that still affected me. That she could look like that, like I'd wounded her just by speaking the truth, and part of me still wanted to soften it. To take it back, to make her okay. I was angry, she said. You walked away and didn't come back. You asked me to, I said. You told me to go if I couldn't handle it anymore. I didn't mean it. I know, I said, but I believed you. She stepped closer again. Bob! I'm not the man from your book, I said. I never was. I know. It's too late for that. She nodded slowly. I didn't come here expecting forgiveness. Good, I said, because you're not getting it. I turned to leave, but just before I walked away, I paused. You said you never wrote the ending. She nodded. I looked over my shoulder. You just did. And I left her there, standing alone, holding 2 apples and a box of tea in the frozen aisle where nothing thawed fast enough. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. Because the story wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. When I got home, I opened the document I'd been working on, the one with my side of things. I stared at the blinking cursor. For the first time, I didn't feel frozen. I started typing, not because I needed to fix the past, but because I finally understood something. The truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, but it never disappears. And mine was still here, waiting for me to tell it. 2 months passed after that night in the frozen aisle. I didn't hear from Gisela again. No emails, no letters, no quiet knocks on my door. I thought maybe that was the end of it. 2 former lovers quietly drifting back into their corners of the world. 2 different versions of the same story, never meant to reconcile. But endings rarely come so quietly. Not when one person walks away with a fortune and the other walks away with a wrecked name. I didn't post online. I didn't hold a press conference. What I did was worse. I wrote a book, not out of spite, out of necessity. I'd spent too long buried beneath someone else's version of me, too long pretending I didn't care, too long swallowing pain so it wouldn't make noise. So I wrote the truth. Every word, every moment. The good, the bad, the hollow. Not to expose Gisela, but to reclaim myself. I didn't change names. I didn't hide my flaws. I wrote what actually happened, what really happened. The manuscript was titled, While I Was Fighting for My Life, She Wrote a Book About How I Ruined Hers. I didn't expect it to go anywhere. I thought maybe 10 people would read it. Maybe a few would message me quietly, say, hey, this version makes more sense. That would have been enough. But then Lisa read it, and she passed it to her agent. Within 3 weeks, I had a publishing deal. Within 5, I had a pre-release interview on a major podcast. And that's when the tide turned. The moment the trailer dropped, it went viral. Not because of me, but because of the title. Because people suddenly realized the man in Gisela's book, the faceless villain with cold hands and colder words, was now speaking back. People were curious, hungry for the other side. And this time, I didn't hold back. I told them about the time I sat by her side through 6 months of therapy she never paid for. About the 3 separate jobs I worked while she found her creative rhythm. About the publisher meetings I helped schedule. About the tears, the breakdowns, the lies she told herself, and others to feel like the victim in every room. But more importantly, I showed the love. The journals, the photographs, the video. The truth wasn't just in my words. It was in the evidence. Quiet, cold, unshakable. And suddenly the audience that had once called me a monster started to shift. Comments flooded her page. Why did you lie about the ending? He was in a coma, Gisela. You said he manipulated you, but now there's proof you used him. Where's your apology? I didn't respond to the noise. I didn't need to. The truth, once told with calm clarity, doesn't need to shout. Her book sales dropped. Her interviews were canceled. David, the boyfriend, vanished from her social media completely. Some said they broke up. Some said he'd been the one to tip off a journalist about the ghost-written chapters in her memoir. Either way, she went silent. I got invited to speak on panels. Asked to write op-eds. People started seeing me again, not as the villain, not even as the hero, just as a man who loved deeply and paid the price for it. When the book hit the bestseller list, I didn't celebrate. Not like people expected. I went to the same bookstore where I'd first seen hers. I found a quiet copy of my own, tucked between two novels with bright covers and smiling endorsements. I didn't touch it. I just stared at the spine for a while, then I walked out. That night, I got a message. A single text from an unknown number. You win. Are you happy now? I stared at the screen, heart strangely calm. I typed a reply. Just 5 words. This was never a game. She never responded. Weeks later, I heard Gisela had moved overseas. Europe, maybe. Trying to rebuild. She released a video on a private account. Something raw, apologetic, teary-eyed. But it never gained traction. The damage was already done. Once people know the truth, it's hard to make them forget. Lisa called me the day the final numbers came in. We were the highest-selling non-fiction release of the year. You could write another, she said. Keep going. People want more. I shook my head. I'm done. Then what now? I live. Because that's the thing about healing. It doesn't come from proving people wrong. It comes from reclaiming the parts of yourself they never had the right to break in the first place. And I did. I moved out of the apartment that still smelled like old memories. I went back to work, full-time this time, doing what I loved. I traveled. I laughed. I met people who didn't know anything about the book or the woman or the hurt. I met someone new, not perfect, not magic, just kind, and I slept through the night again. Not because I won, but because I no longer felt like I had to fight. Sometimes people say, you must still be angry. But I'm not. I forgave her the moment I realized she never had the power to end me. She wrote her story. I wrote mine. But mine didn't end in bitterness. It ended in truth. And truth, unlike fame, doesn't fade.